Well, WVU Sports Now, Mike Asti, Cody Nespor here, Mountaineer Report, as we are now going to bring you a live edition of the show on the heels of an early exit for the West Virginia men's basketball team. A surprising, certainly an upset early exit as Colorado now continues their journey to potentially be the surprise of the Big 12 tournament 16 seed to see where they go as they beat the Mountaineers 67-60. And that's another game blown for West Virginia. We're going to talk about that and make this kind of a post-game show, even though this is hours after the game, and also touch on the news of the day that kind of allowed that to overshadow West Virginia's early exit in the Big 12 tournament and Blaine Stewart's exit from the football program. So the prodigal son is not going to coach under Rich Rodriguez after all. He did it for a month, and that's it. You won't see it happen during the season as he's going to go back to the NFL, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can find every episode of Mountaineer Report everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. And also hit the notification bell and subscribe here on YouTube. And also, of course, find our coverage at WVSN. So we will put a pin in Blaine Stewart. And before we get there, we are going to touch on West Virginia's early exit. And it looked like, even though they weren't having their best game of the season by any means, that they were at least going to get a comfortable win through most of the first half. Colorado then came back, made them sweat at the end of that first half, and then everything that could go wrong did go wrong in the second half. As the Mountaineers got in foul trouble, they couldn't hit a shot to save their life for 3 to 4 minutes, and then Colorado did enough to hang on and get the win. They advance. I've been telling people, and I still feel comfortable in this, that West Virginia is still a lock to get in the NCAA tournament. They were viewed as a lock by Lenardi and company prior to the game. He's now officially put them back on the bubble, but as we talked about before, they do have the best resume of anybody on the bubble, so it'd be pretty hard to believe for them not to get in. But Cody, before we get tournament talk, what the hell happened in this game? Were you surprised by this result at all? I mean, they can beat anybody and lose to anybody, but this felt like at least one game that they were going to comfortably win, and if they won it, then they would walk to the NCAA dance. They didn't win.
Yeah. I think you have to be shocked at this. I was when I was looking up Colorado yesterday, they had beaten they beat TCU in the first round of the tournament, and I was like, oh, have they been hot to end the year? Like, did they get better at the end? And no, I think they lost like 4 of their last 6. But they destroyed TCU in the finale, and then they beat TCU in the first round. So this wasn't really a team that was hot. This was the worst team in the league. It's just, this team. This game really boiled down to, and it's. I wrote about it in my follow-up story. It boiled down to there were very simple problems for West Virginia. Amani Hansberry and Jonathan Powell both get into foul trouble, and they're off the court for large stretches of this game. And in the second half, Colorado focuses on Javon Small, and he doesn't press the issue. He doesn't force himself to take shots. He does, and so they try to play into Eduardo Andre, and they try to get Okani shots, and they, yes, Fu didn't have a very good game, and it's, if you told me that before the game, I'd be like, that game plan doesn't work, right? That's not how West Virginia has won games all year. I don't think that's how they would win a game in a tournament, even against the worst team in the league. So I guess it's equal parts shocking that they lost to Colorado, but not shocking that game plan didn't work, because it's never worked, and it's not going to work.
The only weird thing, we kind of joked on our last show that if Small got over 20 points, they probably should at least win one game in the Big 12 tournament. He did score 23. He was 7 for 15, but he's had worse efficient nights with 20 points, and they were able to win comfortably. If you're just looking at the box score, 23 points, 7 for 15, 4 3-pointers, a couple rebounds, and 5 assists for Small should be enough to win. That should be enough to win. That box score has led you to a victory before from Small. The problem is they didn't get anything from anybody else. Only one other player in double digits in scoring, and that's Okani. They didn't get enough help, and certainly not in the second half. And then, foul trouble was just a killer. But they're not a deep team. Everyone knows it. And if they get in foul trouble, they're pretty much toast unless Small just lights it up. And while he scored, He didn't have enough of an efficient night. He had his issues. He didn't take it over enough at times. They had that scoring drought. And this game almost unfolded in a way that if this is going to happen, Small's going to have to go from 20 to 30 points in order for them to win. But if they play like they've been at the end of the year, because we talked about they have kind of been playing better, even though they had their hiccups, whereas Colorado has not, then they could at least win winnable games like this. And this is an exact reason why, while they're likely still in the NCAA tournament, there's really nobody confident in them doing anything, because this is a hard strategy to roll out, especially if you require more than that from Small to get a win against a bad team. Colorado, let's face it, it's a bad team. There's even an argument and a debate nationally going on that I agree with, that the Big 12 doesn't need to take all these teams to be in the conference tournament, that you don't need to go 16 teams deep, men or women. And Colorado shouldn't even have made a tournament if I'm putting together for the conference. And yet they have a couple wins against a future Hall of Fame coach and a West Virginia team that felt like they were a tournament lock.
And it was so bizarre. I looked, figured it out. Javon went 17 minutes in this game, and he only scored a pair of free throws from the first half into the second half. What? You're the best player on the team, dude.
It could have been a 30-point night for him if he wouldn't have gotten through that. Yeah. And
you're the best player on the team. The next two best scoring options are on the bench. What are you doing? Like, Colorado didn't like double team him like we've seen other teams do. Yeah. They pressured him a lot, and they, he was the main focus, but it wasn't. And then in the post game, I don't know if you watched it, Mike. He said, he was like, "Well, I'm a playmaker first rather than a scorer." And I wanted to be like, Javon, what are you talking about?
You're actually
going to on this team.
I was going to bring that up because there's a fan here in the chat who's alluding exactly to kind of what you're saying here. WVU fan 13 saying, "What's up, guys? Rough game." Fran called it correctly on the broadcast. I do think Fran Frischel is kind of an underrated guy on commentary nationally. He generally is pretty down the middle, and he likes WVU, but I think he's pretty down the middle. A big pepperoni roll fan. Small has to be less unselfish. When other guys aren't hitting, he has to get the job done and take over, kind of in Kobe mode. Yeah, that's exactly, I think, the issue. And the funny thing is, Cody, if you remember, and it feels like it was 3 years ago now, this feels like it's almost more of a Darren DeVries strategy situation than even Javon Small. And it's obviously Javon Small needs to have that dog in him and needs to take over games, and that's on him. But what I mean by that is, if you remember earlier in the season when the offense ran through Tucker DeVries and he was the focal point, and then obviously he got hurt and it became the Javon Small show. Early in the season when they were dealing with hiccups then and they had that loss to Pitt, the commentary then was, Tucker DeVries needs to get that dog in him. He needs to get Kobe mode. He needs to take over games if everyone else isn't hitting. Even if it means he misses a few shots or two, he needs to just chuck shots and say, I'm the best player on this floor. And if we're going to lose, I'd rather lose by 20 with me trying to take it over than lose by 6 or 7 trying to feed all these guys that are not going to hit shots. And the criticism at that point was, even with some people in the NBA who feel like that maybe could hurt him with his NBA pro stock, is Tucker DeVries does not have enough of the quote-unquote dog in him and does not take over games, and he's a scorer first and tries to do this playmaking thing. And his comments and pressers was the same. It feels like this is deja vu. He was saying the same things. I'm a playmaker first. I want to make the smart basketball play. He wants to kind of do the LeBron James thing. It's basketball play, taking over games, more LeBron than Kobe. And while that's maybe sound if you're a basketball coach and you want to make the right basketball play and you got to trust your teammates. And I'm sure his teammates love playing with him. Like now, these teammates love playing with Javon Small doing that. In games like this, that's how you lose to a bad team. Yeah. Because this game, maybe it was the bright lights. This team is not experiencing these moments, certainly not together, including Small. Maybe it was the bright lights of a conference tournament, going to an NCAA tournament. John Small's not been in the NCAA tournament before. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe they got comfortable and felt like that they're a tournament lock and they're hearing what everyone's saying and they don't have to win this game. Whatever it might have been, they needed Small to eventually sit back and say, guys, you don't have it tonight. The lights are too bright for you. I'm the best player here. I'm going to lead us the way. And that didn't happen. So, yeah, that's the one criticism of Javon Small. Without him, they wouldn't be in this spot. He's the MVP of the team. You could argue him as Big 12 Player of the Year. Without him, they wouldn't have the resume that likely still gets them in with the big wins at Lawrence and Gonzaga and those victories. Without Tucker DeVries on the court, he had to take things over at points in the year. But with all that said, it does feel like a little bit of what we saw early in the season during the hiccup periods. The best player needs to take over and say, I'm the best player. And that best player wants to make the basketball play above all else. It almost makes me believe that is what DeVries is telling them to do, that he does not want a Kobe. He wants more of a LeBron. And maybe that isn't going to work in games like this when you have a depleted roster and you kind of need someone to take it over at times.
Yeah. Mike, I love that you brought up Pitt, because I was going to mention this. The problems they had in the Pitt game 5 months ago were their biggest problems tonight. In that, remember in the Pitt game, Amani Hansberry went out, in the first 5 minutes with 2 fouls?
Foul trouble.
And foul trouble hasn't been a big issue for a team that is this shallow.
Foul trouble, couldn't hit shots.
Foul trouble. And then, if you recall, the number one thing we talked about after the Pitt game was Tucker and Javon. In that game, they would go multiple positions where neither one of them would touch the ball. Yeah. And we were like, what was that? Game 2 in the season? Game 3?
Game 3 in the season. Game 3 in the season.
We were like, what are you doing? You're the best players, right? And in this game, it's like I was just saying, like, Javon, what are you doing? Like, it was a shocking, like, lack of self-awareness on his part in this game of, like, do you understand what's going on around you right now? Like, Amani's
this
not
almost
on the
leads
floor.
me to believe
Hal's
again
not on the floor.
Yeah, like this leads me to believe there's a little coaching involved here. And again, DeVries has been a great coach all year. He is a great coach for the future, and without him, they wouldn't be in this spot either. But it leads me to believe, without being at practice literally every day, that this is kind of being taught to them. Like this leads me to believe when you have two different guys doing it 5 months apart, when they're both the driver of a similar team with the same coach. And we've now seen that Pitt is not a good team. Like, that shouldn't have happened. If they played again tomorrow, you would figure West Virginia would win that matchup.
I just think it's, I don't know. Like, I can't, like, Darren's not stupid, right? Like,
yeah, right. No, he's a great coach. 100%.
And the thing that, like, the thing that gets me about it that I don't think it's all coaching is Javon didn't, let me look it up. I have the stats pulled up. Javon's first shot, or I'm sorry, Javon only had one shot in the second half through the first 17 and a half minutes. No coach in America would game plan that.
And he's done that at times too in the losses where he had some real slow starts, didn't take shots until a couple minutes into games, right? Then he's figuring out how to put in the middle of the first half. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where, like, I think a decent bit of this blame has to go on Javon, to where he's got to realize you can't take one shot over a 17-minute period when your team is watching a double-digit lead slip away. I don't care what the defense is doing. Like, pull up from NBA range, right? Pull up from half court, dude. Like, you've got to press the issue, dude. You are the best player on this team
by far. It's not even close. This is a debatable issue, right?
And I don't want to say he was a non-factor in this, because he made good passes, right? They had some success going inside to Eduardo for a few possessions, but dude, this is you, dude. Like, you are the guy on this team, and you're watching a double-digit lead evaporate to the worst team in the conference.
And he's also the hungriest guy. Some of these other guys have eligibility left. He vocally said his entire goal of the entire season was to get in the NCAA tournament. He's not experienced that before. If they don't get in, it's weird to say this because it's going to sound a little ridiculous, but if they don't get in, he has a little bit of himself to blame, even though without him, they wouldn't be in this spot. All he had to do was probably win this game, and they wouldn't even have to go to bed wiping sweat off their brow at all. And I still, think they're going to get in. And I do think they should get in. I think if they get bumped out when they weren't even on the bubble before this game, I know Lenardi now has them on their first four buys. If they somehow do not even make the first four and don't even go to Dayton after the whole season they've had, and they've never really been on the bubble, and they've overcome those losses, but they have 3 top 10 wins. I said this to somebody on X, and I will give this again, and I will literally reach out because I will require, if they somehow don't get in now, even with this loss, I think Lenardi and Katz need to literally release a public statement to answer why WVU is not in, because the entire season they've not been taking this team off the bubble, even while losing. Lose to Kansas State, lose to Arizona State. Fans are saying they don't deserve the tournament, and Joe Lenardi's sitting there saying they're still in the tournament, not even on the bubble. So if you pop the bubble off a one bad loss, as bad as it was, I need that. I need to hear from you. I think that needs to be asked on Selection Sunday. So I hope it is, and maybe it will be. So that's how surprising that would be. It would really be a shocking bubble popping. But again, they'd have them. There's some to blame a little bit here, and you have to wonder if Javon Small was just a little bit more aggressive during the scoring drought, they probably still win this game, because a good team would have killed the Mountaineers with this effort. Colorado won by 7, but they were, they were trading baskets in the final seconds there. It still looked like for a while that West Virginia maybe could come back. It almost felt like one of those games where the Mountaineers were not playing well. They were trying to kill themselves, and the opponent was just not good, so they were going to crawl out of it somehow, still getting the win. And it didn't happen. What do you think now, though, this loss does for the team? Do you believe this now provides concern for the NCAA tournament? Do you think this pops the bubble? Does this now give you even more cause that if they do get in, that they actually, they almost have no shot of any type of solid showing come March? Because prior to this game, they've had a roller coaster ride, but they were playing well enough that there was conversation again, they could catch somebody, win a tournament game or two. Does that seem like totally off the board now for you?
So, for the record, like I don't think they need to worry about not making the tournament. I think what this loss does is it takes them from, they were hoping to be a 9 seed. I think this probably takes them to an 11, or, worse. And, it throws them in the.
Could argue 10 is better than a 9, though, if you avoid the 1 in round 2.
You avoid the 1, yeah. And it probably gives them, it's supposed to give them a harder first round matchup. I don't think a 9 to an 11 isn't a huge change.
No, and there is an argument actually that 11's worse, but if they could be a 10, you could argue a 10's better than a 9. The way the tournament bracket usually, it's basically the same type of matchup in the first round, and usually you do get an easier second round situation. So that you could argue it, and also it probably maybe gives them a better chance of being in Cleveland and having closer travel, because when they were a 9, they're moving more towards Raleigh.
That's true.
So you don't want to lose the game, but that potentially could be a glass half full take here if you want anything out of it. Maybe it sets up the bracket. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just think, I think that's the biggest impact of this. And I think it's I don't know, like it's one of these things, like, is the team going to get motivated by this and really like lock in for the next, week until their first game? Or is this going to be like just the last sputter and they come out in whatever their first round matchup is and they just look terrible and they're like, oh, well, the season's over. We got here. So it is.
So like the team thought they arrived and the season was over and they were
because after the game on Saturday, I mean, they talked really confidently about the Big 12 tournament. Like, we're not going to take it for granted. We're excited to go. We're excited to win a couple games. We love that we got the first round bye so that we don't have to play on Tuesday.
Yeah, DeVries
and to go and, like I said, to lose to the worst team in the league. It's like, and another issue that hasn't cropped up recently that was in this game is the body language was terrible at points in the second half, where it's like, what's happened? Like, and so I don't know. And so that's why I'm like, that's the only thing where I'm worried is like, is this going to be a motivator, and are you going to come out in your first round matchup and be really good, or are you going to sulk around for the next week and get killed and everybody's going to be disappointed?
Yeah, and we've talked about too that whether or not the team could make a run in March depends, as it always does with everybody, but it really does with West Virginia, about matchups. If they face a team that has big bodies in the paint, they're going to be in trouble. If they face a team, and that's Arizona State, and they beat them. If they face a team that can shoot the lights out and can chuck 3-pointers and is going to have 70 points at a minimum, like, say, BYU, who beat them twice, they're not going to be able to beat those teams. But if they play teams that are more kind of even keel with them and maybe don't go as deep and don't have multiple stars, and it's a similar type of matchup, then they certainly could beat anybody who's similar suited like that. If Small gets hot, if Hansberg has a double-double, if they play well defensively like they have really been this season, they've really been playing well defensively. It's been an underrated reason why they're likely a tournament team. And if they can at least hang in the rebounding category, and again, the opponent is not too big for them, literally. Like if that matchup exists, they maybe could do something. Otherwise, there are bad matchups that could kill them, and then they could easily have an early exit. But this Colorado game proves that they could lose to anybody, whether they fit those criteria or not, because Colorado doesn't give you a team like Arizona State or a team like BYU. They're just not good. and they, I mean, that's it. And they were able to beat TCU. Again, a very well-coached team, but it's almost more understandable because I was watching that game with some colleagues while we were covering WVU baseball in that press box, and I put this out there on Twitter, made the joke. They watched Colorado make a run. I didn't really think they were going to beat West Virginia, but TCU, and we even heard this from Jamie Dixon at the end of the West Virginia game, it felt like TCU knew, okay, once you lost the West Virginia game, they don't have quality wins. WVU has 6 quad 1 wins. I think they might have won. Like their resume is not there. They knew their season was over then. It was almost an end of season funeral, and their body language has been bad for weeks. So if any team was going to go ahead and lose to Colorado, TCU made sense. Like they packed it in.
Yeah.
West Virginia's the flip. They managed to get themselves what it looked like to be a lock. They're younger. They want to get in. DeVries is not at the end of his career. He's still trying to prove something. He wants a tournament win. All of that. And it ends up with a similar result. So that's what kind of, the takeaway from this is that they could absolutely lose to anybody. It's not exactly just about matchups. There's another fan question in here, which is going to a lane violation, even with the referees. Always WV fans always bring up the referees. What are your thoughts on the lane violation and just the refs in general? I'm going to say that none of this, I think, is a legit excuse because they didn't score for minutes on end and Small didn't take over the game and they lost to a 16 seed. But do you think there was anything going on that helped West Virginia lose? Like, what are your thoughts on lane violation in particular?
That lane violation, that was the most egregious missed lane violation I've ever seen in my life. Like, I forget who was even shooting the free throw. He was like 75% of the way through his motion, and the guys jumped, and they didn't call it. At the end of the day, that's 1 point. But I don't know. I have an unpopular opinion about referees in that I think the vast majority of games are officiated very well. And
very, very well, or do you think, or even? Because that's a different terminology.
I think very well. I think very well. And I think
when I say even, I mean missed calls for both teams.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I just think in any aggrieved fan base, officiating is a job such that you can always find stuff to point to.
Yeah.
And I every fan base in the country does it. But I never bring up the refs. I think I've brought him up once this year against Kansas when Hunter Dickinson kept getting whistles when he really shouldn't have been. But that's why, that's why you'll see me. Like, I never bring up refs because I think by and large they do a good job, and it's just people see what they want to see. Okay, soapbox over. Nobody wants to hear that. So.
No, I mean, I hate using the refs as an excuse too. And generally speaking, it never fails. The more any fan base, but speaking in West Virginia's fan base now, the more the fan base brings up the referees, the more the team also doesn't deserve the excuse, generally speaking, meaning that the games that West Virginia like this deserves to lose by how they play is how you always get somebody trying to be loud about refs. And I'm not saying that's what the fan and commenter is doing here. They're bringing something up that maybe is a legit topic, but there's always something brought up. This game was not a ref show. Like, even if the referees got together and said, we want to screw West Virginia, which of course they did not do and are not going to do, West Virginia still has no excuse to lose to a 16 seed that's been losing every other game for months. And again, if Small would have taken things over, if they didn't have a 4-minute scoring drought, they would have still won this game in spite of the referee situation. So you can always bring up the referees, and every fan base does it. I'm focusing on West Virginia because I experience it more. But, every fan base does do this. And you could maybe argue what happens in Lawrence. I think everyone in the country thinks, crazy things happen in Lawrence with the refs. But West Virginia was able to win there this year. And outside of that, bringing up the refs is just generally weak in general. Yeah. I don't. This game isn't one to talk about that.
This hasn't been a topic lately, but a few weeks ago, everybody was talking about West Virginia had this big free throw disparity with opponents, where opponents were getting, and they legitimately were. They were getting many more free throws per game than the Mountaineers.
Right.
And people were just chalking that up to ref bias. And for a while, I was trying to fight it, but I was like, people are just going to think that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about it now very briefly because, again, this is very unpopular. Nobody wants to hear it, and I don't want to get yelled at.
Cody Nespor going heel again. The heel turn for Cody.
The reason there was such a legitimate free throw disparity is West Virginia does not attack the basket. They have not all year.
Right.
That's how you get free throws.
About this. Yeah.
Other teams in Colorado did it tonight. They attacked the basket. They went to their big guy inside. That's how Amani ends up with 4 fouls. They go to their big guy inside, invite contact, and they get. And I don't even know. Not even this game specifically. Let me see. I don't even think there's a big free throw disparity in this game. Yeah, 22-18. So it wasn't even in this game. But like I said, in the middle of the season, this was a topic everybody was talking about. And again, I'll get off my soapbox, my very unpopular soapbox that nobody wants to hear.
No, I mean, I agree with this, and I do think that when you have a team that is depleted, is lacking your top star, you're going to the second guy who then emerges and argues as being the best player in Javon Small, that what Javon Small should do with his body type and with a team that does not have a co-star is to try to draw contact and draw fouls.
Yep.
So he's shooting the lights out often, and this 20-point per game average that he's putting up, even 23 in this game with a loss and a scoring drought, he could have had 30 in this game. He's one of the best shooters in the country. At one point, he was leading the Big 12 in scoring. He was legitimately a Big 12 player of the year candidate at one point. And you could still even argue it if you want to go more MVP versus best overall player and what he meant to the Mountaineers. But he could even be more if he would try to draw contact and draw fouls. And I'd imagine if any pro scouts talking to him, not that I'm a scout by any means, they would tell him, again, your body type, you should be trying to draw fouls, be more aggressive. Yeah, you're going to take shots, but you're going to probably get fouls. So if you can hit the free throws, draw the foul. He doesn't do that. He doesn't try to do that. He tries to. So, and the team doesn't overall.
I think part of it, Mike, is like they play 8 guys, so they can't really, they have to play preventative a little bit because
I think everybody but him. I don't think he's going to foul out of a game. I think the refs are going to give him the benefit of the doubt with his size if he's trying to draw the foul, though. That's the thing.
I don't think he's injury. Like
injury is okay.
Something minor. Like
let's
say
injury.
Javon drives in like not even sprain, just like twists his ankle. And he has to sit for the rest of the game. Like that's nightmare. Like that. How does West Virginia recover?
Yeah, if you're going more injury, then I hear you. But
so I think that plays a part in it. And it's also like
that's true.
They just don't. O'Connell could do it. He hasn't. He posts up occasionally.
Yeah.
Amani's not a true center. Sincere can't do it.
They don't have a true center. They don't
do it. So.
Don't have the
the skill set's not really there, but I absolutely agree. Javon absolutely should be doing that. He feels like the kind of point guard that should shoot 10 free throws a game.
That's what I mean. He is that type of. He should be that type of player. Yeah,
but he doesn't. And like I said, I assume a fraction of that is injury prevention.
Maybe,
but
and maybe
part of that
we
is also,
Yeah, maybe.
They play 5 out on offense, which they've done it all year.
Although he wasn't doing it when Tucker was there. I mean, he still doesn't want to get hurt.
Yeah.
But when Tucker was there, he wasn't trying to draw fouls either. He's the type of player that I would tell him going into games, if you're looking at individual goals you want to achieve with Small, I would probably say going into every game, you want to get anywhere from 6 to 10 free throws at minimum. That would be like a goal, and he's not always doing it. It doesn't even look like he's trying to. That would be what I would try to put together. But again, we'll see. And it also is. I don't know if you saw. Did you see Jared's comment there?
Yeah. I kind of forgot about him until is he on Texas Tech now? I forgot about him. I saw him recently on TV, and I was like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah. Meaning if they had somebody that could just be that body, but this, and it might be injuries. Maybe is the situation, but it's almost also an example of how it is phenomenal this team is still a tournament team. Overall, when you look at the roster, when you look at how flawed they are, when you look at Tucker playing 8 games, when you look at Javon Small still being a great shooter, but not even being aggressive, not trying to draw fouls, how every given night they don't really have a number 2, and if they get it, then the next night they don't know if they can rely on that person. It's hot and cold with Hansberry O'Connie and whoever is going to step up and into that role. And maybe you have, like exactly what you're saying, you have your top player playing potentially scared to get hurt. That's usually not a recipe to get to win and be an NCAA tournament team at all. And yet they're going to be there. I still think the resume is going to take them there, even though they lost early in the Big 12 tournament. So it is amazing that after all the adversity, after the last couple years with a transfer roster, no chemistry, injuries, and how flawed this team is, that Darren DeVries is still going to get them into the NCAA tournament. That is amazing. It really is.
I thought, this is a cliche, and people say it all the time, and it's not usually true. I thought the UCF game was the perfect, and I hate using this word because it's a cliche, microcosm of the whole season, to where the first half of the UCF game, you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, this team's awesome. This is the team that beat Kansas and Iowa State and Gonzaga, and they're just kicking ass. And hey, this team's going to win a couple games in the tournament. And that's kind of what the first half of the season was like, where you're like, I can't believe how good this team is, and I can't believe the wins they have. And then the second half of UCF, you're like, man, these guys stink. How did the team ever win? How are they good? In the second
think about it this way too.
Like the season has been that where it's like, how did this team beat Kansas? And how, they play so bad. And so, like I said, I hate to say it's cliche, but perfect little microcosm of the season in that game.
Yeah, that is a microcosm of the season, and that's exactly why you have a big win at Lawrence, but you also lose to Arizona State. You lose to BYU twice, but you beat Gonzaga. You beat Arizona, but then you also lose to Arizona. You lose to Colorado early in the Big 12 tournament. And this team almost if they would have officially blew the Cincinnati game, they almost tried to blow at the end there, where Small admitted he missed his man and you allow a shot to go up. They definitely wouldn't be in. They really couldn't withstand one more of those when you had this Colorado loss in. So this team did everything in it to get a resume that's quality by having big wins and playing really, really well at the beginning of 2025 and even back to 2024 when Tucker was there. But they also did everything within their power to kind of try to squander the season. And it kind of was that roller coaster ride. It almost feels like 2 different teams and 2 different seasons in 2024, 2025. And some of these games have felt like embodiments to the entire season for sure. And UCF's one of them. That is almost the embodiment. It feels like, okay, really good, about to blow it. Nope, they're going to crawl in the NCAA tournament. Like they're still good enough. Whereas this Colorado game was one really good, about to blow it. Nope. Just when you think they're going to still win, nope, they still blow it. And then that would be as if the bubble gets popped and they don't get in. So we'll see the result on Selection Sunday there. That'll cap off the basketball talk, kind of a post-game feel. West Virginia early exit in the Big 12 tournament, losing to Colorado. And I still think they have the resume to get in the NCAA tournament, but they may pop the bubble for the Mountaineers and maybe even Cody Nespor, who's I believe you're looking to cover your first NCAA tournament, that they could eventually pop your bubble. You would feel like this is a microcosm of your year. Especially when you have we have close geographic locations, like this is almost stupid not to cover it, and they somehow would not get in. I think Cody would probably not be able to watch if it was if you're sitting there watching that would be just that's in Cleveland or something.
Yeah, that's the next thing I need, right? the next blow to my year.
Yeah, but I think they're gonna roll that bubble along and get in and let it be populated nonetheless. But we do want to talk about Blaine Stewart, his departure from the Mountaineers. Both of the incumbent staff members who are carryovers from Neil Brown, who Rich Rod was going to keep, and Chad Scott, who leaves to go to Texas a few weeks ago after initially being retained, and now Blaine Stewart, who was going to be retained again, moving from tight ends coach to the inside receivers coach, was tweeting about it, comparing all the great inside receivers, talking about Rich Rod coming back, the emotions of that for him. We, unlike Chad, we actually got to see him physically out on the field, and he was coaching, and he was fully in it. And McAfee talking about him being there and how he fits, and all the fans kind of wanted him to be that carryover if anybody was going to be. And then he's not, and then it's gone, and then the love affair of that, and then it's gone for the South Park meme. And he's going back to the NFL, coaching the NFL in the past with the Steelers, now going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Don't know his official role there. I would have to imagine that it's going to be higher than what he did with the Steelers, where he was an intern and then kind of helped with tight ends and inside receivers. I'd imagine it'd have to be some type of job where there's a title. I don't think necessarily he's like a tight ends coach with the Buccaneers, but I would imagine that he might even be an assistant to something, or an assistant coach in general. There got to be something like that, I would think, for him to leave. But what's your reaction to Blaine Stewart randomly a 9 a.m. kind of news dump on a Wednesday in front of a Big 12 tournament game that he, kind of the news was, I guess, beneficial. It kind of went under the radar, but it's out there that he ends up leaving West Virginia and goes to the NFL, and you don't get to experience Bill Stewart's son coaching under Rich Rod, really.
So, Mike, people are going to disagree with this. You and I sometimes have a good feel for these things. You and I sometimes kind of know what's going on.
Sometimes I feel like I know what's going on. Yes.
The show after it got announced that Chad Scott and Blaine Stewart were being retained, you and I talked for a long time about how professionally for both of them, it didn't make sense.
That was 100% my first reaction.
Sense for them. Yeah. And what do you know? A few weeks later, both of them are gone.
Yeah, and I will also tell you from what I've been hearing, because I've been digging into this, and credit to Mike Azaza, who did break the story on Blaine's exit. But from what I've heard, and you can even actually go to any of my tweets about it and look who liked it, by the way. There's some people that liked it that would pop to you. From what I've heard now from those conversations, that both Chad and Blaine, because some people had the opinion of, okay, well, we can't blame them. NFL, Texas, these jobs, they called them. How could you say no? What I'm now hearing is they decided to come back. They were fine with coming back. They were well aware of the professional demotion they were taking, and they were seeking out other opportunities in the midst of coming back. So I've heard that both of them were seeking out these opportunities, and their agent was told to get on the phone and what other job can I get? Which goes back to what you're saying, that they might have been in a press release, they might have been in a graphic, they might have been tweeting, but the real story is they were not thrilled with the new jobs that Rich Rod was offering them, and they're both gone.
Yeah. Like I was saying, you and I talked about these were demotions for both of them.
They were 100%. There's no way around it.
Like we said at the time, I don't want to repeat myself. It did make sense professionally for them to stay. I
remember you tried to argue a little bit of Blaine just because the inside receivers, is an important position in WVU history, and that's kind of what he was saying. But as I was telling you then, he was leading a position room.
Yes. Yep.
And then now it doesn't matter whether it's receivers or tight ends, whatever room he goes in, somebody else is leading the room, whether it be Ryan Garrett with receivers or Michael Nicewander with tight ends. And there's an ego hit to that. You're leading the room, and now you don't get to walk in and say, this is what we're doing today. You got to say, Ryan, can we do this today?
Yeah.
That's different. It's just different. He took an ego hit. I'm sure he liked the Rich Rod experience, but professionally, that was a hit.
Yeah. And I remember very vividly when he got hired, Neil said, this isn't a feel-good story. We legitimately like Blaine, and I think he's going to be a good coach. Well, hey, the thing about the feel-good story is it goes both ways, to where it's not a feel-good story for Blaine either. It's his job. It's how he
Yeah.
is going to put a roof over his head and food on his table.
Right.
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 So it's
Right.
I don't think, I think people can be disappointed today because they wanted him here. I don't think people should really be upset with him and to be fair, I haven't seen people
Yeah, I
say
don't
that.
think people are. I actually think with both Chad and Blaine, I
Yeah.
will admit the fan base handled both relatively maturely. I think most people realize that, okay, you can't it's the same job, not even a lesser job for Chad Scott to go to Texas. You can't turn that
Yeah.
down. And then Blaine Stewart, it always felt like he was itching to go back to the NFL too, because even in presses, he would talk every presser about the NFL experience.
So
Again,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's like I'm saying, like it's not a feel good story for Blaine, it's his life. So you can't just say, I don't know, you just can't expect him to stay no matter what. And certainly demoting him, like what are you gonna expect? Like, of course he's gonna want to leave and try to get as good a job for himself as he can. So that's kind of my take on it. That's how I view it. Um, and like you said, I do think it's been a very mature response. I think that's good. I think the last thing you want to do is run Blaine out of town again and make him feel like he's not welcome and
Right.
rehash all that stuff, which hopefully doesn't happen. But we'll see. It'll be interesting once it's like an official move, what Rich Rod, says about it.
Yeah, and there also is a lesson to this in a way. This is why, no matter who you are, when a coach takes over a program, they clean house.
Mm-hmm.
He did. Rich Rod may not admit this, Cody, but I'm pretty confident in saying that he kept Chad Scott and Blaine Stewart, the only two. He never was even for a second thinking about keeping anybody else, but he kept those two for reasons that were probably not good ones. And not to say anything against Chad Scott or Blaine
Yeah.
Stewart, but the
Yeah.
reasons why Rich Rod kept Chad Scott, I know for a fact, is because he wanted to keep Jaheim White on board, and he thought he was a great recruiter, and he was flat told by Jaheim, I want Chad here. I'm waffling. And Rich Rod caved. Okay, I'll do what I got to do. Let's keep Chad. During the whole time, Chad was looking elsewhere. Now, Cody, to be fair a little bit, and I like both Chad and Blaine, you could make a little bit of an argument that, and I didn't hear this from either one directly for anyone who thinks that. This is from people that know them, but it's a little crappy. I mean, to be throwing up a tweet on how you want to be doing this, and then you're looking elsewhere. It's business, but it's a little crappy. But that was more of the reason why he kept Chad. It was very Jaheim centered. It was very recruiting centered. He even told us in the press conference after Chad left. He literally said, I don't really know him that well. I hear he's a great coach. Every other hire of his life is guys that he knows very well. He hired somebody that he didn't know, was going to tell you he didn't know, and didn't even say I know he's a great coach. He said, I hear. That was the wording. I hear he's a great coach. He basically was saying, I know nothing about this man. I'm keeping him because I'm being held hostage by a couple players here. Pretty much was the scenario. And
You heard
then
from Jaheim.
and the reason why he kept Blaine Stewart, again, it's nothing against Blaine Stewart as a coach. The reason why he kept Blaine Stewart is, I feel, and this is more of an opinion than sourcing off the Chad thing, but I feel it was very influenced by, I want the perception to be good. This is Bill Stewart's son, giving Bill Stewart's son his walking papers as I walk in with a really poor reputation for many of the fans isn't going to be good. Everybody's talking about they want Blaine to be on this staff. I'm going to keep him. He even did kind of tell us that his meeting, his exit intro meeting or whatever it would be with Blaine Stewart as part of meeting with the old staff when he did meet with all of them was a lot of, hey, hadn't seen you in a while. You're growing up. Like, it's kind of a weird nostalgic thing for me. Same thing with Castillo's son. And that's not a good reason to hire somebody either. Mm-hmm. Everyone else on his staff, he's hiring because he's either worked with them before, Somebody else that he's worked with has worked with them before. He knows what they do. He's directly been in a room when, I mean, whether you want it to be Blaine Stewart or not, and I do think it was a demotion for him, so I totally get him looking for another job. But to Rich Rod's credit, if he wins, it'll be great. If he loses, all the pressure and all the eggs are going to be on his face. So you got to do it your way. And he's been in rooms seeing Ryan Garrett lead a receiver room. He's heard Michael Nicewander and his speech to tight ends, and he's watched him coach tight ends. He knows Blaine from when he was a kid, but he's never been in a room with Blaine Stewart leading a position or doing any of that. He's learning it on the fly the last month. So you can't really hate on Rich Rod for sticking to the guys that he knows. Any coach in the country would do it. Kirk Zanetti did it. He brought his JMU guys. They were a group of 5 guys. He brought them with him to Indiana because he knew them. And that worked out. We'll see if Rich Rod's situation does. But when you're dealing with pressure and taking over a new job as a coach, you need guys that you trust, that you know can get the job done, and that have the similar mindset as you. Really, that's an example of anybody hiring anybody to any company in the world. You want to hire people you trust, you know can get the job done, and you've potentially worked with before. That is what you normally lean on. Anyone would. And Blaine didn't fit any of those boxes except for being Blaine Stewart. I mean, again, nothing against him, Cody. I don't think he would have been retained if his last name wasn't Stewart. I think they tried to figure out a way to retain him and figure out a position for him because Rich Rod wanted to bring in Ryan Garrett and Michael Nicewander. He wanted to bring in his guys. And, now you have the 2 carryover guys leaving. And maybe it would have been a cooler story in some alternate universe if Blaine Stewart's return to the West Virginia could have been after Neil Brown and under Rich Rod. If Rich Rod could have hired him and brought him back, that would have been cooler. You would at least get a year or 2 out of this. But as much as people think Blaine Stewart is a Rich Rod guy because of his father coaching under him and because he was a kid during those teams, Blaine Stewart, by all intents and purposes, is a Neil Brown guy.
Yeah.
And maybe Blaine Stewart, I mean, honestly, maybe Cody, as much as Blaine Stewart was excited about Rich Rod coming back and he even vocalized that on social media, we didn't get to talk to him, but he vocalized that on social. Maybe there was a part of him that was, sad about Neil Brown. Neil Brown brought him back. Neil Brown hired him. He was multiple years with Neil Brown. The fans don't want to hear this, but maybe he thinks he's a little bit more of a Neil Brown guy in terms of his coaching career at West Virginia, and that would only make sense. He never really coached under Rich Rod.
Yeah, I think it's, Chad and Blaine were the two
Blaine
odd
and
men
Chad
out.
must have been TikTok dancers. That's funny. Yeah, I can see Blaine doing TikTok.
They were the 2 odd men out, from the second they were announced. And it's, again, I don't think you can be surprised that they are now out. And I do think you make a good point, Mike. They're the 2 guys. Well, there might be a third guy. They're the 2 guys that you can look at and say they were hired not 100% for football reasons.
Right.
Maybe Rhett was also not hired 100% for football reasons.
You could argue that, although you could argue that. I mean, the only argument in favor of Rhett, of course, as I wrote about, is the fit.
Yeah,
that he knows the offense so much, but yeah, that's fair.
But you laid it out very well. Chad was retained because you want Jaheim White. Blaine was retained because his father is Bill Stewart, right? We don't have to sugarcoat that. We don't have to pretend that that's not true. If Jaheim wasn't on this team, Chad wouldn't have been on this staff for any amount of time. If Blaine was anybody else, 100%. He wouldn't have been on this staff for any amount of time. And it's like I said, you can't be surprised that the 2 odd men out found their way out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little. The timing of this is a little disheartening if you're Rich Rod. It probably does make him regret retaining them because that's the only reason why this looks bad is he retained them. If they would have just not been, if he would have not retained them, even though it was Blaine Stewart. I guess I'll ask this because I don't think anyone's asked this.
Sure.
If you put yourself into Rich Rod's mindset in December, okay? Knowing what we know now, it's hard to answer this, but if you go back to December, you're Rich Rod. You know you want to bring in your guys. You don't really know Blaine Stewart as a coach, but you know obviously his last name and who his father was. You know a lot of the fans are mad at you, and you know who Bill took over, and then that was a rough end, and then he passed away, and there's a whole polarizing thing there. If you were Rich Rod, would you have retained, not Chad, just Blaine right now, would you have retained Blaine Stewart in any way for perception, which I do think was part of this decision by Rich Rod, or would you have said to Blaine, look, man, I got to bring my guys in, no slight to you, but there's not really a spot for you. We can invent this inside receiver thing, but it's going to be a demotion for you. And I think it's best for both of us to part ways. And then you don't even get this issue in March. You would have parted ways in December. It might even been better for him, but we wouldn't be talking about it now. Maybe people would get over it. But would you have kept him and retained him back then for non-football reasons? Because they would have been non-football reasons. Or, like, looking back, do you think that was a wrong move? Without knowing what we know now, just looking back to be fair to the decision.
I think Rich Rod's, the things Rich Rod cares about, he doesn't care about how other people view his program, but I think he does care how he views his program.
Oh yeah.
So
the TikTok thing is part of that. He doesn't want to.
I was going to say, like,
that's part of that. It's a serious part of that, even though it's a joke, but it's part of that.
So that's what I mean. Like, he doesn't want to view his program as having, as he puts it, guys that dance in the locker room on TikTok.
Right.
But he does, right? And that's, I mean, you know,
it's his program.
Right? Yeah. But, like, he doesn't care how outside people. So it's,
no.
The one thing where I think it gets caught up is that he did retain Blaine, because I think if you come in and just get rid of him, it is a PR hit.
That's what I mean. Do you think fans would have been pissed, especially the people already who hate him?
Yes, I do. You know, I like at the time, one of the things everybody talked about was they wanted Blaine back.
Yeah,
and there is some outside pressure there, which you wouldn't expect from everything else Rich Rod has ever done. So that does, I do have to wonder, like, is that a Ren Baker thing? Is that the PR people thing?
Or do you think Ren gave him a nudge, like, we can't fire Blaine right now?
I just think,
especially after the intro presser, when you get a fan yelling out, do you think think Ren went to him like, "What, man? We got a yeller. We can't be firing Bill Stewart's son." But
I think there are people in the athletic department that understand what it looks like. Hiring Rich Rod back, everything that entails, and then B, you've kind of got an easy layup. Like, hey, just keep Blaine around. That's what people want. You need some goodwill, and it's
And to be fair to Rich Rod, if that was the plan, if it was a PR move and makes sense, and I believe it was really, it still worked even with him leaving, because know what Rich Rod now has the cover. If somebody asks him, what are your thoughts on Blaine leaving? Do you regret retaining him? He can easily hide behind and just say, I retained him because I believed in him. He chose to leave for another opportunity. We wish him well, but he can do the same thing he does with players. I'm not going to beg anybody to be with the program. If you want to take another job, that's totally cool. We'll wish you well, but he's leaving us. I'm not firing him. Rich Rod can say, I did not fire Blaine. He chose to go. If he didn't choose to go, he would be here as my inside receivers coach.
I mean, the only thing that would muck that up, and I do think Rich Rod has to some degree gotten his cake and eaten it too in this scenario. The only thing that would muck that up, which I don't think could ever happen, is if Blaine gets to Tampa Bay and suddenly goes scorched earth, right? And it's like, yeah, Rich Rod demoted me, and I hated that, and I didn't want to work there, right? And if Blaine gets to Tampa and just unloads all this stuff, which I don't think would ever happen.
I don't think he would.
I'm sure he probably doesn't even have like a mountain of grievances, other than he wants to be an assistant coach. But that would be the only thing that could muck this up, which I can't reiterate strongly enough. isn't going to happen. I
he's
don't
not
think is
going to
even
do
a
that.
possibility it could happen.
He's not going to do that, but I think it's pretty clear that which I know happened, if you are hired to a job or retained to a job, and then 20 seconds later, you tell your agent, look for other jobs.
Yeah.
Clearly, you don't like the job. And I would then be able to deduce pretty reasonably thinking that he felt it to be a demotion and did not like it.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty fair analysis
Yeah.
based on what I've heard and based on what's now happened and based on what Rich has even said publicly and, other comments and things that I've heard. I can't necessarily out now, but I mean, that's my analysis off of all of that put together, that Blaine did take it as a demotion, wanted to lead a room. Again, we are talking right now. A lot of this depends on what the job title is in Tampa. I mean, if he takes like an intern job in Tampa, we know for sure he just hated being around Rich Rod and wanted the hell out of there. If he gets like some assistant role, I can't imagine it's anything above that. But like it's the NFL, the money might be more, even if the job title's not better. It's a playoff team in the NFL.
Yeah.
A lot of talent there. They score a lot of points. Like he's probably going to look good because the offense will be good. Baker and Godwin, I mean, they put points up no matter who he's working with there. I mean, if you're working with think about this. If you're working with the receivers in Tampa Bay, that's a good job. They're going to score 25, 30, 35 points a game. You're going to have a lot of numbers to be saying that are on you, whether it's you're doing or not. So they score.
I don't think it's you were kind of getting to this. I don't think it's us reading the tea leaves to say Chad and Blaine weren't thrilled with their new jobs, evident by the fact that they have both now left those jobs.
Yeah, I mean, if they loved these jobs, they wouldn't have left the job.
So if they were 100% happy with their new positions, they'd still be here, right? So, like I said, it's not us speculating, really. And now, if it comes out, hey, Tampa Bay really wanted Blaine, and they really went after him and made him an offer he couldn't refuse, it's like, okay, well, but like I said, if Chad and Blaine were happy as clams and were like, oh yeah, we're all in on Hard Edge, and this is absolutely where I want to be, and they'd still be here.
And also, Cody, again, nothing against Blaine, but if Tampa Bay coveted Blaine Stewart for months and really wanted him, they would have hired him earlier. Yeah. When you have a guy get hired in March, really, we're just in front of the NFL draft now. At the end of the NFL draft season, we're in the heartbeat of the off season. We're legal tampering into now legit off season here in the NFL. When that is when you get hired as a coach, not a player, but this is when you're getting hired in the middle of March. I don't need sourcing to know that you and your agent are looking for this job.
Yeah.
Like they're not banging your door down. And if you are somebody that they have an opening and they always want you, a lot of these coaching decisions are months ago. Yeah. Months ago. Like you're getting a job late in the game. This is why this is not a coordinator. This is not a major assistant job. He's joining the staff. Kudos to him. This is clearly Blaine and his people saying, I want back in the NFL. Get on the phone. I need a staff to be on. I don't want to be here. That's what that's what this screams to me. And it's a little disappointing, I guess. Yeah, from a fan perspective, it's a little disappointing. There is the perception thing of having, Jake Castile, Noah Devine, Pat White, Rasheed Marshall. Rasheed Marshall's job title is still kind of murky, to be honest. But you have a lot of people around. It looks like Rasheed's doing more work than his job title suggests, by the way. But even Travis Trickett, I mean, that's perception. That's still kind of good in that way. And Rich Rod can hide and he can say he didn't fire Blaine, but these two are not surprising. Now, if Ryan Garrett doesn't coach in this team and tomorrow he's leaving, that's a little bit weird because he's the guy who came over with Rich Rod and they've coached together before. But I don't think Chad Scott or Blaine Stewart leaving is in any way surprising, should be in any way surprising. It is nice the fans are handling this a little maturely to this point. And it'll be a weird footnote on whatever this Rich Rod tenure is, certainly if it's successful, that right before it got started, that Bill Stewart's son left the program. That would be a little weird. And I know there's also a fan conversation, which I didn't bring up because I'm not going to talk about it here. There's a fan thing that are trying to somehow turn this into that Blaine is still in his feelings of some Bill Stewart things and some Bill Stewart, Rich Rodriguez things and all of that. I don't think that's appropriate to talk about here unless there's legit commentary there. So we'll leave that be. But I know there are some talking about that, so I'm not ignorant to that conversation. But I think you could easily read this into it was a demotion. He doesn't want to be demoted. And, we even said at the time, Cody, to be fair, that part of maybe what screwed this up is I think you even said that, in all rights, Blaine Stewart probably better fits being an inside receivers coach than being a tight ends coach, but he's going to take it as a demotion because Neil Brown gave him the tight ends coach job first. So he had that job first. You could argue that Neil Brown gave him a job that was a big job for your first Power 4 job after mostly being an intern in the NFL with the Steelers. Maybe that was too high of a job. Maybe it would have made more sense for Neil Brown to bring him in as an assistant to an assistant and then eventually get elevated. That would have made more sense. But, once you get a job too big for you and you do well at that job, the tight ends were good. He didn't do poorly at his job. To then be demoted for somebody whose resume is not better than you, you're going to feel some type of way. And I do feel like he felt some type of way. What I do want to ask before we end the show, and I brought this up on X, and this is again why it's different than Chad Scott, especially since we're now in March. Blaine Stewart was the inside receivers coach. There's already a receivers coach there in Ryan Garrett. There's a tight ends coach already there as well. Do you need to fill this job and replace Blaine Stewart, or do you think you could just go on and be like, okay, the PR people and the Neil Brown people are gone. We have the position coaches. We got the leaders of the room. If someone calls us, fine, but we're not wasting money, time, or energy in the middle of spring ball to replace an inside receiver coach while we have a wide receivers coach. Do you need to even replace Blaine Stewart?
No, there's enough coaches on this freaking team already, man.
Yeah.
They could promote somebody if they really want to, but at this point,
do you need the job at all? Could you just eliminate the job?
No, I don't think. I don't think, and I'll claim a little bit of ignorance. I don't think Rich Rod's scheme is going to have such complex route stuff that you need two different receivers coaches. And like I said, there's a billion coaches on this freaking team. Just get one of them to do it.
Yeah, because Jared, for your comment here, I don't see a reason to not hire somebody but Rich strikes me as a guy who I've done it before. I'll do with a small staff. Rich's staff right now is big. This is a big staff. He had a small staff before, but this is a big staff. This is not a small staff. So even if he does not replace Blaine Stewart, this is still a big staff in comparison to what he had at Jacksonville State, Michigan, Arizona, back to WVU. This is the biggest staff in numbers he's ever had. And they made a couple of splash hires with Larry Porter, with Zach Alley, a lot of guys he trusts. Again, if this was Ryan Garrett and you were losing the wide receivers coach or the tight ends coach, you need to replace those positions. They are leaders of rooms. I don't know if you need to have an inside receivers coach replaced.
Yeah.
You could even be a conspiracy theorist, Cody, if you'd like.
Oh.
And here's you could even be a conspiracy theorist and believe that Rich Rod kept Blaine for perception, knowing that his departure was a possibility, knowing he would probably be insulted, and gave him a job that did not need replaced if he left. He didn't make him receivers coach or tight ends coach. He made him inside receivers coach. You could pluck it out, and it's not going to affect your win-loss record. You just give a little bit more work to Ryan Garrett now.
Yeah, a lot of teams don't differentiate receivers coaches like that anyway.
Right.
So
you don't. West Virginia just didn't. They didn't have that last year.
Yeah.
You don't need to have that. If you have an inside receiver coach, you need an outside receivers coach. Rich Rod has talked about how he doesn't trust any of his receivers to be inside, outside, slot guys, or deep threats. And now I got all these different coaches for him. The joke's been out there of they got a coach per player. They got a big staff. They can withstand a departure. They do need to have this calm down a little bit. It's getting a little annoying here. We're one a week at this point. We're at the news, and I know more can come here. And there's players rumblings, and got a spring portal, and we're hearing tea leaves about a couple more potential exits. But in terms of the staff, it got to be mostly left alone. And I don't know if Blaine needs replaced. If he gets replaced, Here's one positive if he gets replaced. That's another sign that there's more money there. That's another sign there's more money there. Because Ren's not going to waste money. If Rich Rod tells him I don't need to replace this, Ren's not going to say let's just throw money in the garbage can. But if there's money that comes in and they want to replace, be my guest. But I don't think it needs to replace. The converse, obviously, is when Chad Scott left, you have to have a running backs coach with Rich Rod's offense. So they had to replace him there, and they got a great coach. I think you can get away with not replacing Blaine Stewart. And it'll be interesting if he ever comes back, how that works, if he's ever the coach there again, if we ever get more of his feelings about things. Yeah, I mean, you're almost tempting me from what you're saying there. I don't think he would ever want to do this, but you're almost tempting me to go through sources, even Steelers sources, and try to talk to Blaine and see if he would offer his thoughts. Because now he's away from the program. I'm not gonna ask anybody to talk to Blaine. But yeah, so by the way, there's a special teams coordinator. He got to be overseeing everything you're talking about there, but there's not a direct punter coach, which maybe why not have that? Yeah, why not have a punter coach, long snapper coach? It's a pretty successful position. I'd like to be a long snapper coach there. Send multiple guys to the NFL. Yeah, but I don't know if you need to replace Blaine Stewart. In all honesty, it is a little weird for him to be leaving now, but. Yeah, he's back in the NFL. Really interesting what that position will be and to hear from him, but not surprising. No, I mean, they were professional demotions. They just were. I mean, there's no way around it. No way around it. There was no press conference that Rich Rod could give you. There was no comment from McAfee that could sell it. Anyone intelligently knew they were demotions, and not now. It wouldn't happen now. But there's also an interesting facet to this staff that I'll lead this conversation with. Maybe this is more of a conversation for next year. But everybody on the staff, Cody, has multiple years in their deal. Pat White is a 1-year deal. So he's the assistant he's assistant quarterbacks coach and special assistant to the head coach, which is almost a made-up secondary title there to appease him. He's assistant quarterbacks coach under a guy who not only was a worse player than him, but has less coaching experience and is the son of the head coach. I could certainly see a scenario where Pat White is starting to not love the surroundings, where he's sitting there saying, I've been a coach for 7 years. I ran this offense to perfection. And I know Rhett has said the right things. I got 4 quarterbacks coaches here. But what I wanted to say to him, and it wasn't appropriate in a press conference, Cody, you have 4 quarterbacks coaches. Only one of them with the title of quarterbacks coach, and only one of them makes the most money.
Yeah.
It's easy for the guy who is the top. If you got 4 people running the quarterback room, it's really easy for the guy making the most money with the title to say we're all doing the same thing. Eventually, the other people are going to start sitting there saying, wait a minute, we're doing the same job, but you're getting paid more and have the title? I don't know. That eventually could be a thing. So I'm not saying anything now, but I think, I wouldn't get married to coaches or players. We keep doing this with fans and they keep messing this up. You got to stop getting married to coaches or players. Because if you think Rich Rod's at WVU for 5 years and is stacking conference titles, I don't know if I can guarantee you Pat White is riding that 5-year journey with him the whole way through. You're going to get at one point, Pat White leaving, probably. Unless he's promoted, but Rich Rod's not going to fire his son to promote Pat White. So where are you going? Maybe he'll be the OC at some point. Maybe Brad will be the OC and he'll be the QB coach. There's not an OC coach now, OC now, obviously, but you just got to stop being married to people, man. I mean, it's very hard. It's very hard to believe that if I'm betting money that Pat White's there in 5 years. So it's probably more likely that Rich Rod's there than Pat White is there in 5 years if I get a bet. But now that we've just depressed everybody, that'll do it for this episode of Mountaineer Report on WVU Sports Now. Find every episode everywhere you get your podcasts and here on YouTube, and find the rest of our coverage as we continue to depress you at WV Sportsnet.